Good morning. We want to welcome you to the Certified Urban Forest Advocate Training Program. I am Lepetiuk with PlanGreen, and on screen is Francis Waite with the South Carolina Forestry Commission.
Hi.
We're so glad that you're spending your time with us this morning. And one of the things that I want to point out first is, as it's already been mentioned in the chat, we do want to ensure that you all receive your CEUs. We know that it's so hard to get all your CEUs. Good, I'm glad you all can hear. We know that it's so hard to get CEUs when there are very few in-person events. So if you are seeking your SCPEAC, your Planning Commissioner credits, you could just, if you could just send me an email with your name and the community you serve. If you're seeking AICP credits, if you could send me an email with your name and your email address. And if you're seeking ISA credits, send me an email with your name, your email address, and your ISA number. So my email address is actually on this title slide here, christyna.lepetiuk@gmail.com. And I'm just gonna advance, here we are. So like I said, you can receive 5 CEU credits if you attend all 5 of the sessions. So this is the first session, obviously, and they run throughout this year and throughout next year. So if you attend all 5 of them, you get 5 credits. All of each training is certified for Planning Commissioners credits, ISA credits, and AICP credits. So whatever you need, we've got it. But first, I want to, if you give me just a moment, we seem to have a minor. If you give me 1 second, I apologize. This is not showing up the way that I anticipated. So, I am going to actually turn it over to Francis for a moment to do a quick thank you while we're just waiting.
Okay. I want to welcome you on behalf of the Forestry Commission and PlanGreen, and we're really glad that you can make it. This is kind of a series that came up because of some particular meetings, and the need was for planning commissioners to get some good education and maybe some new ideas on how to just maybe things that are available, like different softwares and information that's already out there.
Great. And now I'm going to bring this back up, and everyone just let me know that you can see what I'm showing. Pardon me, I'm just looking in the chat quickly just to make sure that I see what's going on. Okay, Donna Jacob says that everything is frozen even when I sign back in. I just want to be sure that everyone can see. So Mary says that you can see. Lois says no sound. Okay, everyone can see. Okay, Donna says she's good. I'm going to go ahead and proceed. Please just continue in the chat if you are still having a problem with either seeing or hearing. We do have Lau Sharp moderating in the chat, so we will see what you're saying in there. But I want to talk a little bit about the platform we're using. We're using Crowdcast, and it has some interesting features. One of the things that we're using today in the presentation is the use of polls. And we're using polls so that we can find out more about you and so that we can see what your needs are as a community and as professionals. So the polls will not pop up. You will have to click down where it says polls. If you can find my little blue dot on the screen as it's moving around. So go down and click on polls. There is one poll that's open. We know that you've answered this question when you registered, but we just want to be sure that it's working and that people know how to use it, because there are polls also at the end of the presentation. Another feature that we're using is the question and answer feature. As everyone saw in the chat box, there's a lot of stuff happening in there, and there's not a way to be able to send a message directly to a person, so it sends to everyone. But if you have a specific question about the training topics that are presented, just click down, if you don't mind, in the Ask a Question section. That little white box will pop up, and you'll be able to type in there and hit enter. The question will go live. So go ahead and type your question in there. And if you see a question that someone answered that you really like and you want to make sure it's answered, there is a little button you'll see in just a moment on the screen. It'll show you 0 votes to the left of the question. And if you didn't ask that question, you can upvote it. A little arrow appears over the 0. So if you can just go ahead and upvote questions that you want answered, that'd be very helpful. And the next feature we want to talk about is the chat feature. Like we said, you can go ahead, you can say hello to everyone, you can say I can't see, I can't hear, you can say anything you want, but please don't answer questions, please don't ask questions in that section because we're not moderating it as we are with the question and answer button. And, okay, I know that Francis went ahead and did the quick thank you. Francis, do you want to go ahead and add anything to what you said?
Yeah, I just wanted to, let everybody know that I'm the Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator for the South Carolina Forestry Commission. And I did want to make sure I thanked the funders and today's participants in the webinar. So the USDA Forest Service, the South Carolina Forestry Commission, the South Carolina local planners, arborists, foresters, and urban foresters, urban forest volunteers, South Carolina board and commission members, and forestry advocates.
Great.
Okay. And so this is me, Francis Waite, and so I work for the South Carolina Forestry Commission over the Urban and Community Forestry Program. And South Carolina Forestry Commission divides our state into 3 regions. We have in the Piedmont, Dina Whitesides, and the PD, we have Lois Edwards. In the coastal region, it's currently open, but I'm also serving as the coastal region urban forester. We work primarily with towns, cities, municipalities, and counties to support long-term sustainable urban and community forestry programs within communities. We provide technical, educational, and sometimes financial assistance through our grant program, primarily to cities, towns, and counties. Our goal is to improve urban forest management capacity of municipalities and counties to manage their urban forests. We are focused on helping to improve capacity by encouraging communities to have an active urban and community forestry management plans based on resource assessments or inventories, hiring professional forestry staff, having ordinances dealing with trees, and having advisory organizations like tree boards, commissions, and nonprofits that are formalized or chartered to advise and advocate for planting, protection, and maintenance of trees in the urban forest. Now I'm going to let Chris introduce herself.
Thank you, Francis. My name is Chris Lepetiuk. I'm the founder of PlanGreen, and I am a mediator, an arborist, and also a planner. I've worked throughout very urban areas. I've worked in Baltimore, Maryland. I've worked through Washington, D.C., trying to get nature into very dense urban spaces, working with the community in those locations. I've also worked throughout the South. I've worked throughout Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, really helping communities achieve their natural resource goals of protecting the resources that are critical for their infrastructure and also building up their urban forests. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Francis with an overview of today's presentation.
Thanks, Chris. Here's an outline of the topics that we're going to discuss today. The training we're having today will cover our introduction and orientation to the Certified Urban Forest Advocate Training Program. And the intended audience is planning commissioners, but other participants will find this information useful and helpful in advocating for your community forests. Today, we're covering trees and their importance to community, the benefits with some facts and figures to help you back up your positions. We're going to discuss some ways you can achieve these goals in your community. And we will also take a look at development costs, profits, and community development. And public health has been emerging as an important benefit of urban forests. And we're going to discuss some interesting data that supports this important point. We're going to conclude our presentation with questions and discuss the content of our next presentation.
Great.
And then what is the training about? It gives South Carolina commissioners and board members the tools needed to plan healthy and vibrant communities. We developed this training material based on feedback, as I said, from our stakeholders and what they desired and needed. And training for planning commissioners was one of the topics that came up. And so we wanted to make material that was relevant to planning commissioners. And during the course of the training, we're going to review the ways that trees can be used to reach community goals and provide case studies of successful communities, review software and policy reports available to board members and commissioners to aid in decision making. Of course, trees aren't the answer to everything, but they are part of a vibrant, healthy communities, and trees need attention, care, and planning resources. And so who are the audience members? If you're logged on, you will receive great urban forestry information that you can take back to your planning commissioners and communities. If you're a planning commissioner, the content is relevant for you, and we hope it will help you with your decision-making responsibilities about trees. We worked with South Carolina planners and urban foresters about the material we were covering over the course of the training, and this should be informative and helpful information to bring back to each of your communities. So if you attend 3 out of the 5 trainings, you can become a certified urban forest advocate, and we can provide you with a certificate of completion with the South Carolina Forestry Commission and PlanGreen logo to show that you have attended the course training. And the training is spread throughout 2020 and 2021 to give you an opportunity to put some of the training into practice and implement during the course of the training. We have 4 more sessions coming up after this first one today. If you don't have the informational flyer on hand, you can jot down the training dates as a reminder: November 12th, February the 25th, May 20th, and September the 21st. Today's session concentrates on the introduction and overview. Session 2 will have a systems focus where we will look at successful urban forestry programs and how they are integral to planning operations in communities. Session 3 will look at tools and utilize existing software reports and guidelines to make planning decisions that protect urban forests and build community. Session 4 will have an emphasis on comprehensive zoning and subdivisions, ordinances to help communities where people want to live, work, and play. Session 5, we will have an ecosystem services focus where we will look to flooding, stormwater, and runoff, and how trees and urban forests can be used by communities to reduce stormwater runoff. And now Chris was going to tell us about some of the benefits of urban trees. Chris?
Great. Thanks so much, Francis. I really appreciate it. So first we want to ask, why trees? Why did we have this whole training series about trees? Why are they so important? Well, they are the largest plants on our entire planet. They clean our air. They reduce our stress levels. They reduce our obesity levels. They cool down our environment. They filter our pollution, and they protect biodiversity. So they are just one of the most important plants on our entire planet. And we are so used to living among trees, especially on the East Coast and the South, that we just feel so much calmer when we're near them. But they really struggle to live in urban environments, though we need them so much. Most urban trees only live for 7 years. And to make this more challenging, 60% of trees are actually on private property. So a city by itself cannot manage only city-owned property and be able to have a vibrant, robust, healthy urban forest. So that's where you come in. That's where you come in as planning commissioners, tree board members, conservation commission members, historic board members, and advocates and volunteers. We need you to really reach out and have the biggest impact on our urban forests. So what we're going to go through now are some of the most important ways that urban forests impact us. One of the ways that we really care about, especially planning commissioners, is that trees and urban forests actually protect and increase our property values. And as you're reviewing plans, as you're reviewing development and redevelopment plans, it's important to know, well, how much tree canopy should I really be looking for? And we can't answer that question for your community, but what we can do is we can give you the latest research. So out of a study in 2016, we saw the greatest property values are derived when property level canopy cover is 30%. So that's the question of too much, too little, how much should we really have? And we see that 30% is really where you get the greatest benefit. If you have too little, not only do you not have the ecosystem services, but you don't have the greatest property values. And when you have far too much, people don't have the space where they can throw a football or they can grow a garden. So we still need some open spaces near our homes, but we want at least 30%. And I do add the caveat here that in areas where conservation is our focus or where maintaining a fringe forest is our focus, we really need to be having higher tree canopy levels in those spaces. But I'm talking about specifically not conservation areas at this moment. Also, I don't know how many of you have neighbors that have been out planting trees while everyone's been at home, but what I can tell you is that if one of your neighbors have done this, you are very lucky because your property value probably went up. Simply having a tree near a home increases the home's property value. And that is such great news because you can have your neighbor do the work and you can get all the benefit. No, I'm just kidding. You still need to plant trees, especially if you listen to this presentation. But trees near a home do increase the value of the home. Another thing that you all face very often is the question of preserving trees on development properties. And we know this can be a contentious issue, and we know there's politics around this, but again, we can just give you the facts. And the fact is that preserving trees on a site does increase the development cost, but those costs are recouped. So the cost to save the trees is about 5.5% added cost to creating a development, but the value of the homes following the completion of that development is actually 18 to 37% higher. So we can see that, yes, it costs more at the beginning, but those costs are definitely given back to the developer. They're given back to the community in the form of tax revenue. So it is absolutely worth it to provide that tree protection and to save the trees that are on the site. What we also see is that having parks near homes have a tremendous impact on real estate values. Having a park adjacent to a home provides the most benefit, and that benefit really decreases as the further you get from the park. And I want to emphasize that we're not talking about only parks that are, Central Park. We don't need parks that are that large. This is seen even with small pocket parks. People just need a space where they can relax, they can recreate, they can sit outside and just take it all in. And they want those spaces near their homes. They want to be able to walk out their front door and get to those spaces. So people really do place a premium on parks and open spaces. I'm going to provide you with an example that is from my own family. My sister and my brother-in-law recently bought a home about a year ago, and they said, thank God we bought a house near this greenway, because during the pandemic, everyone's been at home. And they said, listen, we can walk out of our front door and we can get the exercise we need, and we don't feel like we're so stuck. So this effect of having parks, green spaces, open spaces near our homes are magnified so much more, especially during a pandemic. And there is actually a great value to the community when you put open spaces, trees, etc., near people's homes. A study was completed in Portland, Oregon, and it showed that $1.35 billion of residential property values were actually derived from nearby street trees. So the city of Portland had to plant the trees, they had to maintain them, which cost money. And you as planning commissioners, tree board members know that you're constantly trying to ensure that the funding for urban forestry for trees is not taken away. But an example that you can provide is that the city of Portland actually got a boost in annual property tax revenues to the tune of $15.3 million. So you put the money into the trees and you get it back. So money literally grew on trees for that city. Another thing we want to talk about are tree cover and commercial properties. And we don't often think about the commercial properties nearly as much. We think about residential, but it is a very critical point. And we see that rental rates of commercial spaces with green landscapes are 7% higher. So that's a great benefit for the business. Also, we see that people absolutely prefer treed versus untreed commercial settings. One of the lowest rating in a preference assessment that was completed was, even with beautiful buildings and no trees, that was one of the lowest rated places that people wanted to be and to shop. And one of the highest was treed landscapes, even if the buildings weren't the most expensive. So one of the greatest things you can do for your community is to put trees along commercial corridors. And also, people spend more money in those commercial corridors. People feel more relaxed. They are just willing to spend more money for the very same item in a treed commercial corridor versus an untreed one. So again, this is great for tax revenue. This is great for businesses. A really great example of the impact of providing green infrastructure in an urban setting is the High Line in New York City. I'm not sure how much you all know about the High Line, but it is located in Lower Manhattan. It was a historic elevated railway bed, and it was used to transport freight to factories and railway houses in Lower Manhattan. As small manufacturing companies disappeared, the use of the High Line went way down. It was just abandoned. And in 1999, 2 Manhattan residents who had just been up on that elevated railway bed had seen it kind of grow back, and there were small trees there and there were grasses. They said, we need more nature here. Why don't we work on preserving this space as a green space where people can walk through? So finally, in 2009, the High Line was completed. It was open to the public. And what we saw was something incredible. We saw that nearby property values actually increased by 103%. So, and I just want to remind you all that this is 2009. So the US was in a deep, deep recession at that time. Also, we saw community investment. $2 billion were invested in nearby property development because people wanted to be near the High Line. That was a desirable location all of a sudden, where before it was just an abandoned elevated railway bed. And what we also see is that people were willing to walk farther. So on the street in Lower Manhattan, people do not walk that far. They will take the subway or they will take Uber or things like that. This is pre-pandemic times, but they only would walk 2-3 blocks, and then they would want to have another form of transportation. But when people got up on the High Line, something happened. They suddenly felt calmer. They were willing to walk as far as 15, 20 blocks. And this actually leads into our next topic. And our next topic is that of public health. So why is investing in the urban forest a great thing for public health? So this photo is actually my daughter, and she would be mortified if she knew that anyone ever saw it, but she doesn't know right now. So what we see from the very beginning of life to the end of life is that urban forests benefit our health. We see that a mere 10% increase in tree canopy coverage actually decreases the number of low birth weights. So we have fewer number of infants that are born at too low of a weight, an unhealthy weight. And I can tell you that when she was born near a lot of trees. So this is probably why she was a good sized baby. We also see this benefit amongst elementary school age children. We see that students that can see greenery, they can see trees, they can see vegetation from their windows of their school, they get higher scores on standardized tests. I'm not going to go into the politics of standardized tests. I know there's a lot to uncover there, but what I can tell you is that trees help us relax. They help us focus. They make us feel calm. So perhaps the students are actually just able to better focus on what they're learning, and that helps them to perform and achieve better. So having tree canopy coverage from outside, visible from outside of our schools, is critical for our students. We also see a very important impact of decreased acute respiratory systems. A study completed in 2014 found that trees remove 17.4 million tons of air pollution. I'm not sure how much you are all aware of the really devastating impacts of air pollution to human health, including the United States. But it is second to cardiovascular disease, it's one of the leading deaths in the United States. So NOAC and others found that we prevented 850 human deaths and 670,000 cases of acute respiratory systems because people are able to breathe cleaner air. The trees are making oxygen for us. We're able to breathe deeper, breathe healthier. Another thing that we see is that trees actually encourage us to walk farther. We see a tree-lined street, we see a tree landscape, and we feel comfortable going farther within that landscape. And we also know that in the United States, we do have a problem with obesity. We see that a lot of our adults and a lot of our children are unhealthily heavy. And we are able to see in high walkability neighborhoods that 37% of adults living there meet their physical activity guidelines. That's compared to only 18% of adults living in low walkability neighborhoods. That's a huge difference. We can really help our community's public health by creating spaces that are welcoming to walk through and then encourage people to walk and get there and meet their daily physical activity levels. This is a table that I provided from Kathleen Wolf that she made in 2015. And what I really want to highlight in this table is that in our community, we can have any number of things happening with our community members, right? We can have students that have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We can have low school performance. We have people with cardiovascular disease. And what we really want to highlight throughout this entire training series is that planning commissioners, tree board members, all of these boards and commissions in South Carolina, you all have a part to play in solving these problems. So what the part to play is depends on the problem. For example, if we look at crime, let's say we have crime in a community, and we might look at the community and say, listen, there's really no trees. There's no outdoor common areas that people can gather. Let's add that. Let's make that a focus of when we see a project coming in, a development or a redevelopment project, say, we need to really make sure there's enough trees in this community. And what the outcomes that we see are, through research, are reduced violent and nonviolent incidents and costs to our communities. That benefits everyone. Another really prominent one is that of Alzheimer's disease. You see the people that have Alzheimer's, and if they're able to access a wander garden in their care facility, they actually require less medication. So that is I think anyone would say that is a definite benefit to our community. So I really want we're going to provide this presentation to you in a PDF form following the presentation's conclusion. This might be a great table for you to continue to look at. The next thing that we're going to talk about is social health and community development. And it's not something that we often think about, that trees really help our social and community development, but research shows that it's absolutely true. Neighborhoods with more green space have greater social ties. Why is that? Maybe it's because people are invited to walk outside. It is not too hot outside. They have shade. They have somewhere to go and they can gather with their community members. And in our time of coronavirus and social distancing, where the most safe spaces are outside to meet, this is a really critical, right? If you don't have somewhere to go, then you're probably not going to go out and continue to make and create those social connections. But what's also interesting is that the quality of the green space is actually more important than the quantity. So never should anyone be able to say, well, we don't have enough space. As I mentioned before, pocket parks are an excellent use of space in any community. And you might be asking, well, what do you mean by quality? What creates quality landscape? Well, in this study in 2017, we saw that a quality landscape is one that has tree canopy and one that is neat. So this doesn't mean that it is a clip lawn. It means that the trees are taken care of, that there isn't trash, things like that. So again, we really need to advocate for including the urban forestry and the urban canopy in our spaces, and also making sure that it's maintained. And that is, again, where planning commissioners, board members, commission members come in, because you are part of that advocacy, that you say, no, we need to be sure that this is funded. We need to be sure that this is a way that these spaces can be maintained for our community members. I want you to go ahead and take a look at the two pictures on the left and the right. On the left, we see a community space that is more human-sized. You see a tree in the middle, you see a playground, you see that people are really utilizing that space. And on the one on the right, we see this beautiful wander garden, which I think is just phenomenal. And we see this large open space on the right that in this photo, we don't see anyone using it. And this is another thing to think about. do we really need to dedicate this much space to just an open lawn? I think that we definitely do need some open spaces, but not to that scale. So that's the point that's been made. Another point that I want to make when looking at this slide, and I think that is very critical, is that this study in 2013 showed that neighborhoods with quality green landscapes reported lower levels of stress and stronger social cohesion, even when mediated for socioeconomic impacts. So no matter the socioeconomic level of the community that's being served with that project, they have lower levels of stress when you have green spaces. Again, lower levels of stress no matter the socioeconomic level. So if we want to provide something for our communities, all of our communities, green space is one of the answers. We also see community resilience following disasters. We see the communities that work together to create green infrastructure, they can generate and nurture social connections in those shared spaces. A phenomenal example of this is one that's very close to home. The photo is showing you the proposed Survivors Garden in the Emanuel 9 Memorial in Charleston. So I know that most of you that are on this call are aware of what happened at the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, but in case you're not, I just want to provide a little bit of background. So in 2015, there was a 21-year-old man that shot 9 people in the Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. So as people were making sense of this tragedy and figuring out what to do, plans were developed. The current church had parking lots all around it. And the community said, we need a space that we can recoup, we can regather our thoughts. So plans were developed to create a memorial for the church that really honored the victims of the attack. And in designing the space, Michael Arad, who is the architect, who's the designer of the space, he spent extensive time with the church congregation, and he really wanted to understand their needs. And one of the things that came out of that understanding of their needs was a space that he called the Survivors Garden. It was a space for the community to come together. It features trees, a small open place where people can gather. And it really, in his mind, it highlights the day-to-day life and also the resilience of the church. The trees were part of the solution to highlight the resilience of the church. And it is very important that we never underestimate the power of that and what that can do for a community. Next, I want to talk about urban canopy and aging. And this is another fascinating fact that walkable green space is actually associated with greater longevity in older people. We see these people, they look so calm, they look so peaceful to be in nature. We see that seniors that are in areas with walkable green spaces, they live longer. And again, this is regardless of their age when they arrive, their gender, their marital status, their baseline functional status, or their socioeconomic status. It does not matter. Seniors live and age better in places when they have access to green infrastructure and urban forestry. And I think that is so important, especially when we're looking at communities that are coming and living in the South, many of them for the first time. Many people are coming to the South and they haven't lived there their whole lives. They want to retire there because it's a lovely place to live. So we need to be sure that we're serving those communities well. And a critical aspect of serving a community well is understanding what that community needs. And this picture right here shows exactly what the older community needs and how we can help them as they live in our communities. Next, I want to talk about job creation, right? We're going to go backwards a step, not the people that are retiring, but the people that need to work. We see that urban forestry is really one of the largest growing sectors in the United States. We see that it's expected to grow by 90% as the American urban population increases. And we might say to ourselves, yeah, but because of COVID, no one's going to want to live in the cities. And what I would say to you is that it doesn't matter. We have more and more people in the United States, and our communities are being defined as urbanized simply because we have more people, not because people are moving. An example of this an example of a program that really worked to create jobs is the Philadelphia Power Corps. It provided 1,108 jobs, and the Philadelphia Power Corps, I'm not sure if anyone has any background on it, but it took at-risk youth and it divided them into different sectors that they could work in. They could work on green infrastructure, they could work on urban forestry, etc. But the urban forestry section, they actually derived an additional $8.1 million in tax revenue for the city and $9.9 million for the school district. Because they planted trees, property values increased, and they were able to put more money back into their system to help these people not become at-risk youth. So it really was a great program that helped the people that were in it to begin with. It helped property values, and it helped the city as a whole. We also see that for every $1 million invested in green infrastructure, we see 24 year-long full-time living wage jobs created. We are in a time where we need to be thinking about jobs, and we are also in a time where we see that more people are living in urban spaces, and trees in urban spaces, trees in general, require management. So we need to be sure that we are training people in how they can provide that and how they can mitigate negative events such as trees falling down or such as trees being unsafe. And we really need to be focusing on that. We also see from Texas A&M that urban forests contributed $2.5 billion in industry output and employed over 43,430 people in the state of Texas. Again, this is just another great example of urban forestry being critical to our communities as we move forward. And every job created in the urban forestry sector resulted in another 0.32 jobs in the state of Texas. And you might be asking, well, what am I as a planning commissioner or as a board member or commission member going to do about this? And what we would say is that you, again, are an advocate. You're an advocate for urban forestry, and you are an advocate for getting more trees into your community, and those trees need to be taken care of. Okay, the key takeaways that we have from this presentation, and if you hear nothing else that we said, I really want you to understand that a robust urban tree canopy, it makes our properties more valuable. It raises the valuation of those properties for everyone. Remember, that's not just if you plant a tree on your property, it's if there are trees on the street, it's if there are trees on your neighbor's property. It also helps people become more healthy. We see that our air is cleaner. We see that our people can breathe better. We see less incidences of asthma. We see healthier birth weights. We also see our students performing better. It creates greater social ties, right? We saw that people are more likely to go out of their houses and talk to one another, and they are more likely to create those connections that are so critical, especially in our time where people are socially distanced. If you were a person that didn't have a lot of social connections prior to the pandemic, and now you are forced to become socially distanced, that can be very, very difficult. We want to make sure that we're taking care of people, that we are not putting them in a situation where they don't have those social connections. And finally, that it creates jobs in our communities. Like we keep saying, trees need to be taken care of. The average urban tree only lives for 7 years. So it's absolutely, trees need help to survive because our urban conditions are so harsh for them. And part of what we can do is make sure that we're training people in how to keep our urban spaces green and how to keep our urban spaces cool. And that's so important. Also, I guess this is the one thing that I would say if you heard nothing else. You are all obviously civically active. You care about other people. You care about how people live. And just want to highlight that you are not only civically active, but you are social justice workers and you are life changers. You are determining how people live. You're determining what they see out of their windows. You're determining how hot their street is. And that is absolutely life-changing work. And we want you to know that we see what you're doing, and we absolutely are here to support you as you go through that process. And if you have questions, we definitely want to make sure that you're reaching out to us. But this piece is so critical, that you are social justice workers and you are life changers. You determine how people live. And that's a huge responsibility, but also one that is so critical to us. So how do you advocate for trees? We've heard this very impassioned speech about how important they are and how you are definitely you're part of the solution. As we go through this webinar series, we really want to help you. We want to hear your feedback. That's one of the most important things. And we want to provide you with what's next. So the next webinar is going to highlight real communities, how their planning commissioners, board members, planning and urban forestry staff have worked together to protect and grow the urban forests in their community. And why do we want to do this? We want to provide real life examples so that you can say to your municipality, you can say, listen, this was done here and it worked. So that's what our next webinar is. I know that Francis had gone over the schedule. Now we just want to take a minute and we want to see if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate that. That was great. We have a couple of questions. This one is about some studies, so we may have to do a little bit of looking, but the question is, have there been any studies that compare the fiscal benefits of trees in coastal areas versus inland areas? I'm curious if the cost benefits change in areas prone to hurricanes and other tropical events, taking into account debris management, damage to homes and roads caused by trees and flooding, and the benefits of trees in soaking up floodwater, et cetera, post-disaster. So I'm not aware of any studies. Do you know? I mean, we could definitely research that too.
Yeah, so one of the studies that we came across during our research was talking about not necessarily the fiscal benefit, but that when people care about trees, when they know that they're so important, they're more willing to help with the cleanup post-disaster. And that could have an impact on the fiscal aspect. So it doesn't become this kind of, a disaster happened and someone has to take care of it. Instead, the community bands together and says, the disaster happened. We need to be part of the solution. We need to help mitigate this. How can we do it? So I'm not sure, Ashley, if that answered your question, but there are definitely studies about communities that value urban forestry and how they handle those disaster situations.
All right, thanks, Chris. And then the next question is, when we are in low-income communities and we want to provide these amenities, how can we provide these benefits without promoting gentrification?
Yeah, one of the ways that we can do this is we can look at, well, first of all, I want to say that the Census 2020 data is coming out very soon, and that's going to give us the most up-to-date information. So having the most up-to-date information is obviously critical. Before we do anything, we want to make sure that we have that. The second thing that I want to say is that we can look at the percentage renting versus the percentage owned in those communities, and we can use things like rent controls, so that we can make sure that the rents don't go up, forcing those people out of those communities that they've just obviously worked so hard to help green and make them wonderful and livable. So that's my short answer. The first answer is data, and the second answer is one of the ways is using rent controls.
Thanks, Chris. And do you have a source for the benefits to seniors? Would love to have it. That was from Lee Kane, the source for benefits.
Lee, if you don't mind, I will send that to you in an email.
And then finally, do you include palms in your discussion of tree canopies?
So palm trees are technically, as probably most people know that are in here, palm trees are technically giant grasses. So we did not include palm trees in our benefits, but there are native palms that provide a ton of leaf surface area that are very good to include in our landscapes. So I actually didn't quantify, the benefit of palm trees in this presentation, but I do want to highlight that there are native palms that are really great to include in our landscapes.
Okay, thanks. And I did want to say a quick reminder that if you want to fill out the poll, you've got to click on poll, and you can answer the questions. So just click on polls, and that we'd appreciate your feedback. And then Charles Weber wants to know if we can get a copy of the slides.
Yes, Charles, what I'm going to do is I'm going to I can send out through Crowdcast to everyone that was in the presentation a PDF version. So following this, I'm just going to go ahead and send out all the slides to everyone.
And then there's a question, do you have a list of all the surveys mentioned in the slides you could email to planners?
Yeah, a list of all the references. Is that what's
I think that's what she must mean, to be able to, because you were talking about the results of the survey, so maybe she just wants those references to help her make her case. So.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I can put it together. I have all of them in kind of my own way that I organized it, but I'll put it together in a way that everyone can use it as a document to work from.
Okay, that's what she said she wanted. So
perfect.
Well, great. I think we have completed everything, and we really appreciate your time. And please take the time to answer the poll. And we appreciate any comments to help us improve this. This is our first one, and we'll have it a well-oiled machine by the next couple. So we appreciate your patience with us. So, Chris.
Great. Well, again, please, first, thank you so much for bearing with us and listen to all of our ranting if you want. Send us, if you have any comments that you can't click on it and, really explain yourself in the polls, please just send it to Francis and I via email. Again, we really want to be sure that we're addressing your needs as planning commissioners, as board members, as tree advocates, as urban foresters, as arborists. This topic is very near and dear to, I think, all of our hearts, and really want to be sure that we're providing you with the most up-to-date information and the things that help you in your community.
Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate you coming.
Okay.